And I would like to welcome everyone to the 2022 deliberative session for the district. I'd ask that everyone rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Mr. Moderator, I have a point of order. Mr. Moderator, I have a point of order. You had a gentleman in the audience who you said would get the sergeant at arms if he didn't wear a mask, but we have a board member not wearing a mask, so if she could do that as well, that would be great.
Thank you. I was under the understanding that the school board is responsible for whether masks are worn in the school buildings.
Yes, the school board is responsible for whether or not the masks are worn in the school building. But under the RSAs, the moderator of the deliberative session is charged with responsibility for ensuring public safety and health. And as a result of that, the moderator has made a determination, which was publicized, that all participants in this meeting would need to wear a mask, so that there is an option of being in this room and wearing a mask or participating from the other room in which masks are not required.
Well, I disagree, but I'll wear a mask, but I do disagree. I believe it's up to the school board, and the school board is not requiring masks tonight.
Well, thank you for compliance with the rules for the meeting. So if we're ready to begin, I appreciate everyone's compliance with the rules that we've set up in order to ensure the safety of everyone here. So welcome to those watching on cable TV, anyone who is watching live or on one of the replays that'll be available on Comcast Channel 20 between Friday and Election Day, March 8th. This is also available for review as many times as you would like, on demand through the SAU website. You have copies of the warrant which were provided to you as you came in. If you don't, they are on the table right directly outside the door. So I will dispense with reading that at this time. This evening, we begin the deliberative session of the 2022 Souhegan Cooperative School District meeting, under which will be governed by RSA 40:13, also known as Senate Bill 2. On Tuesday, March 8th, we shall vote via paper ballot here at Souhegan High School on the warrant. As we agree to its wording this evening, voting will be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Voting in Mount Vernon on March 8th will be from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Mount Vernon Village School. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the chair of the Souhegan Cooperative School District, Stephanie Grund, to introduce the school board.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Stephanie Grund. I'm the current interim chair of the Souhegan School Board. To my right is Steve Coughlin. To my left is John Glover, and then Christine Peters, George Torres, and Laura Taylor, who is our secretary, and Pim Gronstra, who could not be here this evening.
I'd also ask that you introduce the other officials here in the front.
Okay. I will introduce Adam Steele, the SAU 39 superintendent, who will introduce the remaining part of the staff.
Sure, thank you. To my right is Amy Facey, Business Administrator, Steve Chamberlain, Assistant Superintendent, and Michael Berry, Principal of Souhegan High School. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
And at this point, I would like to introduce the Chair of the Advisory Finance Committee, Dan View, in order to ask him to introduce the members of the committee.
Hi there, my name is Dan Bayou. I'm the chairman of the committee. This year we had 7 members, and several of them are in the room. Christine Grayson, Jeannie Liu, John Boquette, and in addition we had Howard Brown and Joel Gordon as our full members this year. And Peggy Harris.
Thank you, Dan. And I'd like to take a minute to thank the committee. Each year, we impanel a committee of citizens to provide a review of the budget proposals from the school district, and they work throughout the budget development process in order to provide a perspective on of the taxpayers for the school board and the administration. They have a very important role also of then providing a report to the citizens, to the voters, about their recommendations and their findings relative to the warrant articles. So each year we do that, and there is a rotation through the committee. And so one of my responsibilities is to appoint those members, and it is I won't say it's a thankless job, but it's a quiet job that involves time throughout the fall and into the budget season. And if it's something that you would have an interest in doing or taking a look at doing, please contact me, and I'll be happy to take you through what the task involves and give you consideration for an appointment to the committee. Tonight, the Advisory Finance Committee will make comments and a recommendation on each one of the warrant articles. So I'd also like to take a minute to thank Stan St. Ange and the staff of Sohegan High School for their assistance in setting up tonight's meeting. And also to Brad Freeman for his efforts and expertise in working with the broadcast tonight and the recording and rebroadcast. So the voters at tonight's deliberative session, which is operated under SB2 rules, are empowered to do 2 things. One is to discuss and deliberate each of the warrant articles. This is your chance to ask questions about what is behind particular articles and their rationale for funding. With that, the voters can take 2 courses of action on each warrant article. You can maintain the original wording of the article, in which case, if we do, that wording will be placed on the March 8th ballot. You also have the opportunity to make amendments to the warrant articles, and if amendment is approved, then the amended wording will be placed on the March 8th ballot. To amend requires a simple majority of the voters here tonight in order to approve an amendment. So we decide the wording on the articles which all voters, registered voters, will have an opportunity to vote on March 8th. So what you see when you go into the ballot will be what you decide tonight. And that will take place March 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. here at Sohegan High School and 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Mount Vernon Village School. So in addition to the work that is done tonight that will be voted on at that meeting, the You will also vote on members of the school board and other elected offices that are important to the town and the school position. So there are a series of rules of order that we put in place that we operate this meeting under. And so you have in your information package a copy of those rules. What I would like to do is just to highlight a few of them to make sure that everyone understands how we proceed. This meeting is subject to the state right to know law. Everything we do in this meeting is subject to one law or another. And we are required to maintain a complete and accurate record of what is said and who says it. So to ensure the accuracy, one of the things that I ask everyone to do is that if you come to the microphone to speak, that you introduce yourself, give your full name and your address, and then make your comments. If you are making a motion or seconding a motion, I would like you to follow the same procedure. So you rise after a motion's been made, and if you wish to second it, state your name, your address, and that you second the motion. Where that becomes very helpful is that while we record the meeting, we also have our clerk who is here this evening taking notes. And it's critical that we have that accurate record, but it also means that your name is recorded in perpetuity so that 150 years from now, when your your predecessors are doing research on town meeting, they will be able to see that you actually made comments. So there are 2 microphones at the front. Feel free to use either one of them. There's not one that is for or against. What I will do is recognize individuals as they come up to speak. Again, name and address. Make your comments. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes of speaking time. You may, if you need longer than that, then once everyone has had an opportunity to speak, you will be given another 3 minutes to make your comments. If you wish to make an amendment to a warrant article, you need to put that amendment in writing so we know your exact wording. You then need to bring that to either myself or to the clerk, and then make your motion from the floor in order to amend. So any motion, should we get into a long discussion, to call the question will only be recognized by the moderator once everyone who is currently standing and wishing to speak gets an opportunity to speak. Once they have been duly recognized and had their opportunity, the moderator will recognize that motion. The body will vote on it. And if they vote to close discussion, we will close discussion at that time. So if you are supportive of these guidelines, I will ask for your approval. Just by all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed, like sign. You have a blue dot and a blue card. So as you vote, please raise your blue card, whether you're voting for, or then if you're voting against, raise your blue card. It gives us a good opportunity to account should we need to. At this time, what I'd like to do is to introduce our superintendent, Adam Steele, for a presentation on the state of the school, which will be provided by our principal, Mike Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We like to begin this presentation with the state of our schools, and there's no one better to give that presentation this year than Principal Michael Berry, who's in our 2nd year here with us and is doing a wonderful job. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Mike to the podium for for our State of the Schools presentation. Mike.
Good evening, folks. It's a real privilege to stand here and represent Souhegan High School in my role as principal. I consider myself really fortunate to be here. The school is full of good people, hardworking staff, good kids who have a sense of purpose for why they attend school. And it's our job as educators to create a school and an educational experience that allows kids to come to school where they can be the best versions of themselves. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can and concise as I can. There's lots of good information in here. We're going to be sharing this information in different venues and different audiences over the course of the spring semester into the summer, into next school year. But we really want to take the opportunity to talk about, that it's a privilege to get to be an educator at Souhegan High School. It's a privilege to work at Souhegan High School. It's a privilege to go to school at Souhegan. And there's high expectations in this town, and we should be, delivering and meeting those expectations. And the support from the community and the families is absolutely outstanding. And I consider ourselves lucky to work here and get to be part of this community. And so what we want to talk about is the experience for kids centers on the Souhegan 6. And as you kind of scroll through, we have our mission with respect, trust, and courage. And we have our Souhegan 6 about what we expect from kids. And what we make our decisions are based on creating the experience for kids based on this. And a lot of our interactions on a daily, weekly basis come on modernizing the Coalition of Essential Schools, the mission statement, and the Souhegan 6. And that's kind of how we build our school and the culture around it. And the school has a long foundation of this and a long history of it, which is very appealing. And so as we kind of get into some of the other things, Steve, as we kind of keep going through, we talk about student engagement and how we want students to own their own learning and come here with the purpose and partner with their parents and partner with the school to become the student they want so they can move on to the next phase of their life and be able to have their first choice. And something that I want to be really clear about at Souhegan High School, your first choice is what you and your family want your first choice to be. And as a public school, we should be a public school that works for as many kids as possible, if not all kids. So if you want to come in and go to the workforce or go into the military or a four-year school, you should be able to come here, foster that interest, and be able to move into that direction. That is something we take very seriously, and I take super seriously as principal, that a school should not just work for some of the children, that it should work for all of the children. And some of the ways we look at this to see if it's working, Steve, if we move on to the metrics and the demographics that you can look at later, but as you get into SATs and NEWA scores and post-college, plans, you can see what kids are doing. You can see where their interest levels are. You can see it changing a little bit as we move into 2022, which is why our emphasis on to evolving and meeting the needs of our community. And so as we continue to look through this, you can see some data that we have a good school, we have good opportunities, we have good things for kids to do. Kids can leave here and become what they want. And we should be really proud of that. As just in my second year, and I can tell it's been a whirlwind, like I came down here, in the middle of a pandemic, the beginning of it, and it just hasn't ended. And so we're here to continue to evolve the school and be the best version of it while we're in the middle of the situation that we're in. And then the students, here are doing really well with that. As you can see with some of the other metrics, Steve, that they continue to persevere and perform at high levels, higher than the state average. They perform well on NEWAs, but there is room for improvement. There is constant reflection. There is constant ways to make your organization better, make the experience better. And that's really what we're trying to do here at Souhegan. And we want our values at Souhegan to align to the strategic vision of SAU 39. We want it to be reflective of the community here and what they value, because they've evolved. Our community has evolved, and I'm a new member to it, but it's evolved. And we want to stay true to our foundations, but make sure we are evolving and making sure that we are meeting the needs of our community. And we have the staff and the people to do it, and the kids are responsive, and this is a really good place to go to school, and the metrics will go ahead and tell you that. So you get some PSAT scores as we compare to other places. There's some good things happening there. Those are good places to be compared to, and there's room for growth. So as we can keep moving on, Steve. This is our journey for us. And you can see there is a real commitment to align Souhegan to SAU 39 strategic plan. And you can see in this, and I'm not going to read the slide to you, but you can see in it, there's a strategic vision, and then this is what we're doing to align to it while we're being fiscally responsible, while we are trying to have a budget that is reflective of the values that we have. So we carry on. For us, it comes down to this. The people that do all the good work in schools are the teachers. And as the principal of the high school, it is my job to make sure that we are making the lives of teachers easier, that we are giving the tools and the resources they need to make sure that their classrooms and their lessons are engaging and meaningful for students, so students who are challenging to work with in 2022 have an environment that they're excited to be in and excited to be around. And our teachers are doing a really good job at that at Souhegan High School, and we expect that they will continue to do that. But for us, it is for us making sure that we are providing them all the professional experience and all the tools so they can do their jobs to the best of their ability. So as we kind of move through the rest of this presentation and you see some of the things that we're doing, school is hard right now. And if anyone will tell you that it's not hard, it's hard for students, it's hard for teachers, it's hard for parents, it is hard. And we are doing what we want to make sure that we are adapting to the difficulties that are present in 2022. And so a lot of that comes down to is how do you navigate the stresses that are all outside the building into, and then you have to come in here and be in the building. And so a lot of our work comes down to supporting teachers in regards to curriculum instruction and assessment development, but also giving them the tools that we never really had to give people the tools prior to a pandemic to function in a supportive environment. So you see us talking a lot about resilience with staff and with our students on a daily and weekly basis. And so there's another slide that talks about that monthly themes, Steve, and we can move past that. We talk about how we want to supervise and support our staff. And there's been a lot of conversations, and I really enjoyed the budget development process with the advisory, budget advisory committee, the school board. It's thorough, it's detailed. I'm impressed as a new member to the community on how much thought goes into it and how much people care. But one of the things that we talked about is providing more support for our teachers in what we call as domain leaders. And so there's been a lot of conversations about that and why we're doing it. And what we want to make sure is that our adults in the building have everything they need, so they can support the district initiatives. And so as we move on, Steve, you can see that here's it. Good instructors are not born. It's constant reflection, constant growth, constant support, and that's how we create the experiences that we want. And we have talented, and this town can attract talented instructors and has for years and years and years, which is why in combination with the students that you have the school that you have. And so as we continue on, this is some of the things that we have done as people talk about what are administrators doing and what are the domain leaders doing. We made a real commitment instead of just getting through the pandemic to working with our staff and to make sure that they have the support. And you can see the data behind us about the amount of times and conversation and contact hours that domain leaders and administrators and other people are in classrooms to support our teachers. Because I can tell you, a personal philosophy of me and mine as a school leader comes down to you move a building, you improve a building, you work with people by having conversations with them, observing them in their workplace, supporting them, giving them the tools. And you can see by this slide right here, which I hope is a powerful slide for people, we are making a commitment to this. And we think it's going to result and has resulted in stronger relationships between administrators and teachers, and will continue on that throughout over the years, which will result in a more meaningful, engaging classroom environment for teachers. So we're really excited about this work, and it aligns to the SAU 39 vision. So Steve, we can carry on. Here's some data about real transparent. I feel strongly about being transparent, about enrollment numbers, with staffing, how it matches, and with the times and the increases and the decreases in enrollment. And you can see some there, and I'm happy to share this with anyone if they ask. And wrapping up, Steve. Yeah, and then you see kind of the evolution of what we currently have here. And then you can see what we hope to have, just added a domain leader, and it's reflected in the budget and been part of our process. And at the end of the day, I talked quickly in the matter of time. This is something I'm really interested in talking more about. So if anyone here ever has questions about it, the direction of the school, I would be more than willing to sit down and talk to you about it and go through it. But I'll go back to what I said. It's a real honor and a real privilege to represent Souhegan High School as the principal and be in this position. We have a good school with lots of good kids, with good teachers, and I'm excited to be here. And thank you for listening and appreciate your time and look forward to what the rest of the evening brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Principal Berry. At this point, what I would like to do is to move into the consideration of the articles. Article 1 each year is for the election of officers. And so while I'll present that article, we have no authority to modify it or to amend it. And so Article 1 involves the election of officers voting by official ballot on March 8, 2022 to the following school district offices. It would choose 2 school board members from Amherst for the ensuing 3-year terms, to choose 1 school board member from Amherst for an ensuing 1-year term, to choose 1 school board member from Mount Vernon for the ensuing 3 years, and to choose 1 school district moderator for the ensuing 3 years. Voting for these offices takes place on March 8th. So on to article number 2. And so I shall read the article and then open this up to the school board for their presentation and your discussion. Article 2, shall the Sohegan Cooperative School District raise and appropriate as an operating budget, not including appropriations by special warrant articles and other appropriations voted separately, the amount set forth on the budget posted with the warrant or as amended by vote of the first session, this meeting, for the purpose set forth therein, totaling $20,314,580. Should this article be defeated, the default budget shall be $19,812,800, which is the same as last year, with certain adjustments required by previous action of the Sohegan Cooperative School District or by law. Or the governing body may hold 1 special meeting in accordance with RSA 40:13, 10, and 16 to take up the issue of a revised operating budget only. A majority vote is required. This article has been recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School Board by a vote of 6-1. It has been recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 7-0. The estimated tax impact of passing this article is 54 cents per thousand for Amherst and $1.36 per thousand for Mount Vernon. Estimated tax impact of not passing this article is 35 cents per thousand in Amherst and $1.11 per thousand for Mount Vernon. Just a quick note is that the operating budget does not include the appropriations proposed in the other warrant articles that we will consider tonight. At this time, I would like to recognize the chair of the school board for a motion on Article 2.
I'd like to make a motion to place the operating budget on the ballot.
All right, so Stephanie Gren moving to place the operating budget on the ballot. Is there a second? Would you come to the microphone, please? State your name, address, and make your second.
Tony LeBranch, 83B Christian Hill Road in Amherst. I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. LeBranch. And I'll turn this over to the Chair, Stephanie Grant.
Thank you. John Glover will be presenting information on an operating budget.
Welcome, voters of Amherst and Mount Vernon. Before we get into the operating two, I just wanted to thank Mike for his presentation and offer a bit of an introduction from the school board's perspective. And in addition to Mike, there's been a lot of meaningful contributions to this. It's not that one person can make all of this happen. We had the enduring effort this year and the past few years in particular of all of our staff, our counselors, our nurses, our faculty, our paraprofessionals, our facilities technicians, our cafeteria staff, our coaches, our volunteers, our substitute teachers, our resource officer, and the administrative leaders both in our district and at the SAU level. I wanted to also pay a special thank you to the diligent effort of our Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee, led by Chair Dan Vayu. These are your citizen representatives doing independent due diligence for this budget process. Our common goal is to ensure that we continue to make sound investments in the Souhegan Cooperative High School, a crown jewel of both of our towns. The slide you see now is the portrait of a graduate. This is what we aim for every single student to graduate with these 6 key skills, which we know are highly desired by employers and requisites for entrepreneurs. Knowledge, not just acquired, but also the ability to acquire knowledge. Critical thinking, the ability to distinguish between objective truth and subjective opinion. Communication, whether one agrees or disagrees with another. And collaboration, to recognize and leverage the strength of many, especially when in a diverse setting, all leading to the confidence to become a leader and a lifelong global citizen. These skills are consistent with our culture of student agency and responsibility. On the next slide, we see a theme here in support of our SAU 39 strategic vision, where this strategic vision connects with our budget proposals. The strategic vision was presented by Superintendent Steele and unanimously adopted by the SAU 39 board in the summer of 2019. Implementation began with the restructuring of leadership coincident with the new superintendent, and we understand that that process is essentially complete. We have Mike Berry, for example, as our new and hopefully longtime principal here at the high school. Implementation has been frustrated to some degree by COVID-19, but nevertheless, we are moving forward. For example, we learned a lot about how to effectively teach remotely, despite some of the challenges that it still presents. We have up here personal success plans. There's an existing pilot in the 9th grade. We're aiming to extend that to rising 9th graders and continue for rising 10th graders. The pilot incorporates goal setting with periodic review, with anchoring adults such as advisors, and in conjunction with the guidance department. The work that we're doing here has no budgetary impact, but it's very important for student success in the future. We have their anchoring adult, and we're examining looping that to some degree with exit paths that may be needed. Also no budgetary impact. We're looking at ensuring that we have a postgraduate success or a bead on how successful our graduates have been. We want to grow our existing but somewhat nascent program to communicate with alumni about their post-high school experiences, which can be and will be important metrics when evaluating the success of our programs here. No budgetary impact for this work. We're making a minimal budgetary impact for our affordable next step this year. We're proposing that anyway. We already have dual enrollment opportunities where students can earn college credit while here in high school. And while each postgraduate institution has their own criteria for accepting these credits or recognizing them, many do in fact accept those credits, which can help alleviate some cost burden for students who enroll. Mastery learning. This has a modest budgetary impact in some of our learning structures. We're trying to expand the domain leaders to improve instructional practices. We're trying to add a business teacher to meet student demand in an important and relevant area of study. I want to take a minute to talk about the domain leaders and just to say that the goal is to improve the instructional practice to achieve three primary purposes. Number one, maintaining expertise in their respective domains. This, we see this as a critical piece for the success of these domain leaders. They will be teaching classes to keep connected to students and garner trust among the other faculty. And they'll be sharing their best practices with the faculty through informal observations and feedback. And finally, our main budgetary impact this year is in our support of the safe facilities. The principal investment there is our plans to renovate our out-of-date and largely broken our science labs that are ineffective, broken furniture, our aging turf field, our groundskeeping, cleanliness and injuries. We'll get into some of those details later. Notably, we have a capital needs assessment, but because of savings realized, we do not need to ask the voters for additional funding this year. Next. Here's a slide that shows our enrollment projection. It shows an 11-year actual historical and a 4-year projection based largely on matriculation from Amherst Middle School. We've also included in here our staffing levels over time, and you'll see a fairly consistent trend that staffing has remained fairly tight with enrollment for a long period of time. You'll see in current times that since about FY21, our enrollment has stabilized and even has increased some after a period of declining enrollment. And again, that the number of teachers has generally followed enrollment. On the next slide, you'll see budget changes over the last 10 years. We see generally stable operating budgets over the last 10 years with modest increases over the last few years commensurate with our faculty agreement. On the next slide, you'll see our total appropriation comparisons for the warrants you'll be voting on tonight. The notable things here is the operating budget is only up 2.7%. The capital reserve fund, as I already mentioned, is not needed this year. We want to start making some investments into renovating our science labs, and this money here proposed in these warrants will give us a good first step into doing that sensibly. We want to continue funding the replacement of the turf field, which is expected to end its useful life in the next 4 years or so. And the total percent change when you compare all the appropriations is less than 5%. It's about 4.4%. And with that, we'll get into the operating budget. Here in the executive summary is just one way to view the changes relative to last year, whether increases or decreases. We compare last year's approved operating budget to this year's default budget calculation to this year's proposed operating budget. And this comparison yields the 2.7% previously mentioned. The next slide, we'll see the operating budget by Sohegan Advisory Finance Committee categories. These are categories where subcommittees of the main committee meet and interview and discuss with administration officials who are the leaders of these various categories. The drivers here for special education. It's our highest increase, and that's due to matriculation. We're required by law to add 1 special education teacher, 2 paraprofessionals for new students, and a half-time speech pathologist. And the administration drivers, which is our next highest increase, half of our new science domain leader salary and benefits is in here, about $42,000. There are routine salary raises and benefits cost increases for the school administration, which includes the principal, deans of faculty and students, guidance counselors, our social worker and related support personnel. We have about $15,000 in here for dual enrollment tuition assistance to reduce barriers and more fully support academic rigor and achievement. And we have our regular SAU 39 assessment, which this year is about $98,000. Curriculum drivers. We have the other half of the new science domain leader, about $42,000. We're in the third year of our PPC faculty salary and benefits cost increases is in there. We have AP testing fees assistance, which, like dual enrollment, is to reduce barriers and more fully support academic rigor and achievement to the tune of about $15,000. Athletics drivers, we're looking to hire an in-house trainer. We've been contracting this services for a long time. It's not a very efficient way to have these services, especially when those people are in and out of our school like a revolving door. We have no power or authority to keep them here, and we see value in allowing them to know our athletes and so that they can better serve them over a longer period of time. Food and transportation drivers. This is down. We've removed vehicles previously purchased, about $70,000 is removed. We have savings by not replacing a food service employee. And with that savings, we're able to invest in repairing equipment, replacing aging, worn out kitchen equipment, and we absorb the increases in the bus contract and special education transportation. Technology drivers is down. We have savings by not replacing a retiree who managed the theater, and we have savings by reductions in software and equipment replacements. And finally, facilities drivers, that is also down. We've removed the one-time expense to replace the lockers, which was about $75,000 last year. On the next slide are pie charts showing for curriculum and special education. These charts highlight a common theme among most of the budget categories, which is basically that staffing is critical because it's the costliest. Therefore, we and the administration and the Sohegan Advisory Finance Committee ask about the right number and placement of staff to protect our collective investment. We look at actual need based on enrollment and student interest and student need. We look at quality in terms of academic rigor, academic support for all levels of student achievement, social emotional support for any student in need, and the right programs for a modern era, which may increasingly include alternative modes like VLAX and eSTAR that are proven effective and enable students to both accelerate and broaden their academic experience with no added taxpayer cost. These charts also illustrate that most of the costs are required by law or by agreement, and that proposed investments for improvements are essentially negligible when compared to the whole. A note about special services. We are, of course, required by law to provide these services. For many years now, under the leadership of our Special Education Director, Meg Beauchamp, we have achieved and still strive to achieve the goal of retaining our students in our district. Achieving this goal saves our taxpayers an estimated $2 million annually. Remember, out-of-district tuition costs are typically on the order of $100,000 to $150,000 per student, and sometimes much, much more, even up to $600,000, depending on the need. Daily transportation costs are nearly $300 per vehicle per day. When we keep these students in-house, we not only save significant taxpayer money, but we also improve the student experience by enabling these students to remain with their local peers. Unfortunately, and although we do save significant money, these costs actually increased our cost per pupil calculation because out-of-district tuition and transportation costs are excluded from that formula. On the next slide is a summary of our default budget calculation. You'll see the removal of one-time expenditures and special warrants from last year. You'll see adjustments in special services for these additional staffing needs I mentioned earlier. You'll see that if you look at salaries and benefits, you'll see that they're essentially flat. Only about a $33,000 increase this year. Even though we're in the third year of a PPC agreement, this is, shall I say, in the spirit of a resident Frank Brown used to say many times is, I don't really care what you do so long as you do it with the money you already have. Well, these are some changes we're trying to do right now with the money that we already have baked in. And you'll see that there. That's a good illustration of that point. It's also notable, it's not on this slide, but our health guaranteed maximum rate is only health insurance, it's only 2.7% this year. That's a huge savings. Our dental guaranteed maximum rate for insurance is down 1.25%, if you can believe it. Our retirement system for teachers is up 21.02%, and for non-teachers is up 14.06%. On the next slide, you'll see what we're calling our proposed budget items at risk. These are things that are in our proposed budget that if it does not pass, then we'll have to start making decisions about what to do. Everything in this proposal connects back to our strategic vision. Supportive and safe facilities was part of our strategic vision. In here, this is our furniture and equipment lines, our groundskeepers, our facilities technician to maintain a clean, safe school, and the athletic trainer to prevent injuries and get to know our students. You'll see in here mastery learning, the science domain leader, and the business teacher. And you'll see an affordable next step with the investments in AP testing and dual enrollment tuition assistance. And finally, just a little bit of cost about, or a little bit of discussion about our cost per pupil on the next slide. You can't see the actual numbers here, but I'll say it in for the record. The actual for FY21 was $23,279. The FY22 projected cost per pupil is $23,877. And the FY23 projected is $24,664. You'll see for over the last 20 years, our CPP has been higher than the state average. You look at the blue line compared to the yellow line. For the last 5 years, our CPP has basically tracked with the state average. Here's some key factors to consider. We have always invested more in our local education than others, and we've earned a reputation of excellence as a result. This is why so many people move to our towns. We cannot rest on that reputation, however. We must continuously earn it. And that sometimes means making decisions and changes that take time to bear fruit. And on the next and final slide of my presentation, we see some costs removed in the CPP calculation. The notable piece here is what I already mentioned, that our out-of-district tuition costs for special education are excluded. Not a lot of other districts are doing what we do with respect to that. But while it increases our CPP, it actually decreases our cost by about $2 million annually. Thank you for listening. Mr. Moderator, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other comments from the board? If not, I would like to recognize the chair of the Advisory Finance Committee for the report.
Good evening. Again, my name is Dan Bayou. I'm the chair of the Advisory Finance Committee. This year, the Sohegan Advisory Finance Committee worked especially hard to scrutinize the proposed budget line by line, but also to look beyond the surface to understand any new initiatives. We were committed to not only vetting the proposed budget numbers, but also to look deeper at what those dollars were being spent on and whether they were an efficient use of tax dollars toward improving teaching and learning. We found the increase in the budget to be minimal and justified and agreed that we could support the budget as a whole. It addresses many work. Closer. Okay. Is that better? Okay. The budget addresses several worthwhile issues, including some facilities needs. We know that the condition of the school is not quite where we would like it. The kitchen equipment needs attention, and it provides money to support students in the AP and dual enrollment programs. But it was clear that we had some questions about the domain leaders. 3 more were proposed in addition to the 2 that were already on the ground this year. some of the sticking points that we had with the domain leaders were they had a very broad set of responsibilities, a very broad job description, including supervisor, evaluator, teacher, including teaching 2 classes, instructional coaches, curriculum coordinator. They were supposed to be principal certified. They were, going to be expected to coordinate the curriculum across the entire district, not just at the high school. So we had questions about how much all that would cost and whether one person would possibly have all those skills and all the time to do everything. So we kind of dug into it, and we had many productive discussions with the administration and the school board. And it was agreed that we could go with just one more this year for the science department. And at $85,000 each, that was probably a prudent move to see how they do and whether they were worth investing in. We need to take the time to learn more. We needed to understand the origins of the model, whether this was going to work as described in helping to improve instructional practice. And following the discussions during the review process, the administration reduced from 3 to 1. We thought that emphasizing the teacher support role was probably the better way to go in the short term, considering the teacher morale coming out of COVID and all the issues that have been happening lately. While the committee supports the overall budget, the following were identified as areas of concern: the rate of change or turnover. The school has seen what seems to be a high rate of change in personnel, including a changeover in every leadership position throughout the district, principals, vice principals at every school, many teacher retirements and other attrition in faculty and staff. High turnover rates need to be considered as a causal factor for any of the issues that the school is currently experiencing. They have potentially detrimental impacts on overall instructional proficiency, faculty morale, and instructional outcomes. We'd also like to see an exit interview program established for teachers that are departing. The administrator pointed out that there has been a decline in instructional proficiency, which was highlighted in the budget presentation, resulting in inconsistent student outcomes. Despite an existing formal teacher evaluation policy, summative teacher evaluations have not been conducted in up to 10 years, which was suggested as one potential causal factor for the decline in instructional proficiency and inconsistent student outcomes. Having a plan stating how evaluations will be conducted and by whom would be an important piece of any future strategic plan. We had concerns about the governing structure of the school. It appears that we've moved away from the principles of the Coalition of Essential Schools, and we're not sure that the school can still be categorized in that vein. Without such a comprehensive roadmap for the future of the school, it's becoming more and more difficult to assess whether the spending priorities objectively advance a cohesive educational policy or a composite of loosely related programs. The addition of domain leaders could create a top-heavy administrative structure. They want 5 of them, and they are all administrators, and they are all very expensive, at about $85,000 in salaries, or altogether with benefits, they would probably cost the district $500,000 to $600,000 a year. But overall, except for one sticking point, I think we made some pretty good agreements and pretty good compromises, and the budget is definitely supported by the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I would like to open up the floor to comments or questions from members of the deliberative body. If you wish to speak, please come up to one of the microphones. I have a question, and you have an opportunity to make a 3-minute comment or question.
My name is Martin Goulet. I'm a resident of Amherst, live at 22 Veterans Road. There are at least 2 ongoing investigations that would appear to expose Souhegan High School to potential financial liability in the future for defamation. One of these was reported on WMUR and in Boston media today after the SAU put out a press release on the topic. This is a budget-related question. Thank you. Has the board considered our insurance coverage or any financial reserves for adequacy to address these risks? And should we be considering that in the upcoming budget?
I'll just make a brief statement that some of these ongoing investigations, we can't make any comments on.
I'm not
at this
asking, I'm
time.
asking about a financial question related to the
But
potential
the
risks and
insurance,
exposures.
I mean, that's something that is a valid question that is, we will consider looking into.
Thank you. We have evaluated the performance of our students using NEWA and other testing tools for years. We've used these metrics to inform our investment in their education. This budget is asking for an increase in investment in teacher improvement through the Domain Leader Program. It appears we're lacking metrics, and the SAFC chair just confirmed that appearance by stating that we haven't done teacher evaluations over the last decade or so. And so we're not actually tracking, we don't have any metrics for teacher performance and effectiveness. Why should we decide to increase this investment without this necessary foundation? Why wouldn't we start by putting the foundation of metrics in place so that we can evaluate what we seek to improve?
So I mean, I'll start and see if there's anyone that might need to chime in, but so we had many discussions regarding domain leaders, and regarding metrics, you're not incorrect. There's been a past history of not as many evaluations. As you can see from Mike's presentation, they are getting into the classroom now. They are working with the teachers now. And we do have 2 domain leaders in the school at this time who have been working and coaching with teachers, and we've had good feedback. There are metrics that are being looked at that include not just the number of evaluations, but we also have coaches in the past, which are not renewing as a position this year. We're putting it as a domain leader. We found the coaches didn't have enough strength because they were not necessarily in the classroom teaching students. So there was a loss of connection. So we were looking at a different sort of position that would have a stronger background that could be in the classroom coaching.
I would just advise the school board to be very wary of making investments and improvements. I mean, if you look at what happens in the business world, anyone that comes forward with an investment request to improve something, the first question that's being asked about that investment is, show me the metrics that you're trying to improve. The turf field that was referenced in the budget, is that the football field? Is that the artificial turf field?
Yes.
So I was on the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee for 4 years, starting 6 years ago. And we've been asking about that and the purported revenue that was supposed to come from that field over the lifespan of the field. So it's a little bit dismaying to see that it's now up to $85,000 a year that we're putting against that field. It seems a little dishonest, to be perfectly blunt, that all of those warnings from 6 years ago, having been ignored, are now we're being asked to foot the bill for that. That's not a question, that's merely a comment. I'd also note for the audience that admin is up 7.3%, and that is a number that, if you look back at past budgets, that's an area where we're increasing that bucket faster at both the Souhegan level and at the SAU level. And I don't think that's where we're going to get educational benefit for our children, is by increasing the admin budget. And finally, I would ask
So, Martin, your 3 minutes have expired.
Finally, I'd ask the board if,
So your
do we know
3
how
minutes
much
have
employee
expired.
turnover is costing us?
Thank you. You're welcome to come back up for a second round. Are there other comments, questions?
We're gonna get tired of hearing from us Goulets, but I'm Anna Goulet Zimmerman. I live at 22 Veterans Road here in Amherst. I just had a couple of quick things. First, I wanted to thank Mike. I know it's hard to come in during a pandemic. I'm sure it was difficult to bond with the teachers, spend time with the teachers, start forming those relationships last year. And I'm really glad to hear the conversations we heard today from him about the conversations he's having, how they're working together. And it sounds like that's moving in a great direction. I just want to remind, obviously, that the other part of that is strong relationships are built on trust. And it's only with trust and without teachers having fear of retribution, and I'm not referring to you specifically, Mike, in any way in that regard, but that they can come forward and they can talk and they can share their ideas. And that's something the entire board, the SAU, and everyone needs to foster within the teachers if you want them to have those strong relationships with admins. Second, I want to thank the board and the SAFC for all the work they've done. It's clear that you've put a lot of time into this, put a lot of time and thought into where decreases could be made. And on a positive note, I'd like to point out that if you take out that approximately $1 million that's needed to fix the science rooms and the other long-term maintenance, I guess I might call it, this budget would actually be $500,000 before default. And, you know, I've been around this school a lot. I have kids in this school, and I hope people will support the budget because I know those projects need to be done. I would echo what my husband said. I was a little disappointed to see the turf fields in there. I understand that that's not the folks in front of me's. You didn't create that problem, but it was something that was promised. They would pay for itself in the future, and it is disappointing to see that that's not happening. But I do thank you all for your time and effort, and those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Are there other comments to come to the meeting?
Good evening, Dwayne Purvis from Amherst. I appreciate you guys for what you're doing and what you're trying to do. I haven't decided if I can support this budget. It's moving in a more positive direction than ever before for the number of years that I've analyzed the master schedule. What I guess I'm concerned about is some years ago, there was this idea to have domain leaders. That was the sliced bread that was going to fix everything. That didn't work. Then a few years later, there was the need to have an assistant superintendent to effectively improve things. And that didn't happen. Now you're telling us we need domain leaders. Domain leaders. Or what is the term? It's domain leader?
I think you meant coach before and domain leader this time.
It was a coach. It was the instructional coaches prior. So I guess I'm wondering, that's probably 7 or 8 years later, what was the impact on our students that this problem still exists? And why should we believe you now? Is there anyone that can answer that? What's going to be different this time that's going to give our students that advantage, that edge?
So I don't, I'll get this close. I don't have numbers in front of me, clearly. But so my general impression of what's happened over the years is the idea of instructional coaches was we could get gains in the performance of our students on the standardized tests by helping the teachers improve their instruction. And so instructional coaches didn't always exist. They came in during my lifetime and they moved us. We're in a better place now in reading and in math than we were before we had instructional coaches. But my personal opinion is that we've gone as far as we can go with instructional coaches, and it's time to do something different to stop from being stagnated at our new improved level and try and get us up another notch. Who knows how high that notch will be? And the input from the superintendent is that he has seen domain leaders work in another district. That other district has attributed most of its growth to the existence of their domain leaders. So, and that's why they're being recommended to us. And he persuaded the board that this was the next best step. Continuing to do instructional coaches would have been essentially maintaining the old model to no incremental effect. And that's one of the problems with education is everyone hates change. They just want things to roll along the way they always were. And if you want to get improvement, you got to make change. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. End of personal opinion.
And I might just make a comment regarding the assistant superintendent position. One of the things that we had realized is that we look at the transition of our students from the Amherst Middle School into Sohegan, and we felt there was a little bit of a weak link and we would like to see a stronger bond. And so 2 years ago, we looked at it and said, you know, we have this open dean of faculty position that we decided not to fill. And we decided to support hiring an assistant superintendent at the SAU. So the proportion of, actually, if you want to look at the salary, there was no effect on our budget, but we do have an assistant superintendent who is looking over both schools, who is into the classrooms, working in instructional practice and trying to help make a smooth transition for our students.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments?
Sorry. Anna Goulet Zimmerman, again, 22 Veterans Road, Amherst, New Hampshire. I just wanted to respond to the comment that was just made about the domain leaders. I'm all for looking for things that will improve instruction. I'm all for looking for ways we can support our teachers. I hope, again, echoing my earlier theme, that we're talking with our teachers about if they think this would be helpful and they think would be useful. The main reason I stood back up is I was curious about the question saying that the superintendent shared that this program had been very successful at another district, because I sent about 2 months ago an open records request for any documents pertaining to any districts that were compared and that were already using this program, and for any data showing the success of this program. And I got back from the SAU that there was none of either.
So any other comments or questions to come before the meeting tonight?
Tony LaBranche, 83B Christian Hill Road. My question is similar to that one. What district specifically was the one which the superintendent said was super successful because of these domain leaders?
So this information was shared with the board at a board meeting, so it was in the minutes. And it was his personal reflection. He was not waving a document around at the time. And it was Wyndham.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Linda Kaiser, 6 Manchester Road. Where would I find the job descriptions for all the various jobs in this school?
Adam, could you answer that? I believe it would
And
probably
would
be
you all
HR.
speak up? I must be hard of hearing. I swear to God. I can barely hear anything with the mask on to start with, but you don't get next to the mic. You sit back like this and expect us to understand you. And I feel like I'm falling asleep up here.
Mr.
Where are the
Superintendent?
job descriptions? I want to read them.
Sure. So can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I am actually not sure if they're posted on our website, but if not, I'll find out if they can be posted on our website. And if,
Would you mind taking your mask off when you speak?
happy to.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if they're on our website or not. If they're not, I'd be happy to provide them to you.
Thank you. When would you be able to do that?
I will contact our HR department this evening. I'm not sure how long it will take to get back.
Thanks, Adam.
So are there other comments or questions? Seeing no one coming to the microphone, Article 2 will be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. At this point, I would like to ask for a motion to restrict reconsideration. The purpose of that motion is to ensure that while you're here tonight and voting on this or commenting on this and having an opportunity to comment on it, that it does not come up again later in the meeting and get amended. So can I have a motion to restrict reconsideration?
So moved.
So moved by
Steve Coughlin.
Steve Coughlin. Is there a second to that motion? Please come to the microphone.
Jeannie, I can do the second if it's easier for you. I second the motion. John Glover here on the school board.
Thank you. Every once in a while, you need to get up to move around, to wake up, right? All right. All those in favor of restricting reconsideration, please say aye, voting with your blue card. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Reconsideration is restricted. So we'll move on to Article 3. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District vote to establish a science lab renovation capital reserve fund per RSA 35:1 for the purpose of renovating the science labs at Sohegan High School and to raise and appropriate the sum of $500,000 to be placed in this fund. Further, to name the Souhegan Cooperative School Board as agents to expend from said fund. A majority vote is required. This is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District by a vote of 7-0. It is recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 6-0 to 1 abstention. Estimated tax impact to passing this article is 18 cents per thousand for Amherst and 25 cents per thousand for Mount Vernon. I'd like to recognize the chair of the school board to move the Article 3.
I make a motion to move the article to the ballot.
Yep. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Please state your name.
John Glover of the school board seconds the motion.
Thank you. It's essential for the clerk to understand who is making a motion and seconding it. So I'll recognize Chairperson Gunn to introduce this article.
Thank you. Before I discuss this warrant article, I would like to clarify that the high school annex is being used for many classes: computer and photography classes, foreign language, core Division I classes, and some of our Division II science lab classes, which is what I'm going to speak about tonight. The Science Lab Renovation Capital Reserve Fund would be for the purposes of renovating the science labs at Sohegan High School and to raise and appropriate the sum of $500,000 to be placed in this fund, with the Souhegan Cooperative School Board to act as agents to expend the fund. Our Souhegan Science Department is committed to ensuring that our students have authentic, hands-on, inquiry-based experiences to promote a deep understanding of science. The students are active participants and they learn by doing. In almost all of our lab classroom spaces at Souhegan, there is a tremendous need for more square footage, more storage areas, and significant repairs. The most problematic of classrooms are in the annex. The science classrooms were designed over 20 years ago to be flexible classroom spaces that could meet a variety of needs. Over the years, we have expanded our course offerings to include more lab science classes, and our need for laboratory science space has increased. The distinction is that a science classroom is where lectures and discussions take place, and a science laboratory is where students do science, which means safety standards are essential. Our science students are not in labs that are conducive to lab work, especially for advanced lab work common to our Division II courses. Our more recent course offerings include science dual enrollment courses, which provide significant benefits to our students. The teachers have met requirements to be instructors for these college courses, but our classroom spaces do not allow students to safely access this curriculum. So what are the issues? The annex science rooms are too small. The optimal square footage of a science lab is 50 to 60 square feet per student. The National Fire Protection Agency recommends lab space used for classrooms and laboratory investigation to be 60 square feet per student. Our current class size of 22 students is approximately 35 square feet per student, almost half of what is recommended. Working in a science laboratory where students work with equipment and chemicals poses significant safety risks. Those risks have been shown to increase by 66% in high schools where there is less than 45 square feet of students' workspace. Microscope storage space is inadequate. All of the outlets in the room are on the outside walls instead of a traditional setup with lab benches that have outlets. The sinks in the classrooms are retrofitted with a wood top to provide counter space. However, this then prevents sinks from being able to use during class. Because the wrong desks are in the classroom, much time is wasted when microscopes need to be set up and cleared during lab work. In addition, there is a lack of storage for the microscopes. As a result, they are frequently left out or stored above cabinets, making them difficult to access and prone to breakage every time they are moved. One of the biggest safety concerns is science lab is burns. The The amount of classroom space in the annex labs does not permit enough room for students to work safely with hot plates and boiling water. Teachers in courses like marine science have reduced the number of lab activities that involve the use of hot water because of safety concerns and crowding around hot plates and hot water for fear of burns. Microbiology labs require the use of flames for sterilizing inoculating loops. While these labs have gas jets to use with Bunsen burners, they are located under the wooden cabinets, which present a fire hazard. Teachers have tried using longer tubing to be able to set the Bunsen burners on desks away from cabinets, but this is another safety concern. Also, there's no fume hood in these classrooms, which prevents teachers from using alcohols or other highly volatile substances most students in upper level lab classes would have access to. Desks are too small for the size of students, and they're made up of raw material for chemical and acid work. And also, there are too many sinks that are way too small to be functional. The recommendation for sinks is 15 inches wide and 15 inches deep and made of stainless steel. For the strength of our science program and the safety of our students, we have worked with architects and designed classroom laboratory space that would meet the needs of curriculum and safety standards. We have received architectural and engineering estimates that renovate and redesign the 6 classrooms down to 3, and would be an approximate cost between $1 and $1.5 million. However, we are still obtaining final cost estimates and evaluating the prices we have been given. Therefore, we're not ready to come forward with a full and final plan. We are asking for about half the money in a warrant article this year, with a final amount to be put into the capital reserve fund next year.
Are there any other comments from the board? Seeing none, I'd like to open this up to the body. If you have a comment or question on this article, please come up to the microphone.
Hi, Ken D'Ambrosio, 30 Woodland Drive, Amherst. I just want to say that science and STEM in general has really taken the, I mean, you look at the job market these days, and science and technology is really what's driving it. And so I have to admit, I'm kind of excited to see some changes here, especially given safety, because not being able to use some of that stuff is definitely a detriment. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Moderator?
Excuse me.
Mr. Moderator?
We made a last minute change to the slide order because the Advisory Finance Committee should be able to comment on this before reconsideration.
I will make sure that happens.
Thank you.
It's actually on my agenda as well. It was neglected. And I apologize to the committee. So now let's have your, as long as you're up, let's have your comment or question.
Hi, Terry Beam, Amherst, New Hampshire, and I just want to applaud the board. I know that this has been an ongoing concern and an issue, and trying to find the right time to introduce it and get started is hard because it does cost money. So I applaud you for starting and for having a plan to have this taken care of sooner than later, because I know that it's an issue that can't wait any longer. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who have a comment or question? Yes.
My name is Ann Dodd. I live at 36 Mason Road in Mount Vernon. And it seems like this is just a 2-year process. And I think that it's a really great thing that you're trying to do, but I wonder why it wasn't just made into a bond and spread the cost over 30 years instead of hitting the voters with the whole cost 2 years in a row.
Thank you. I'll just make a brief comment. We've talked about this many times with we have a joint facility committee that works with the Amherst School District, knowing that there's large projects out there. And there's a Sohegan 2.0, we call it, that looks after different projects within the school itself. And all the groups are trying to work together, trying to balance how the money is spent. Knowing that there are large projects coming through other school districts, we're trying to balance this and not impact the taxpayer right away. There are other projects coming down the road, which we'll discuss in a bit.
Hi, Pete King, 36 Kendall Hill Road in Mount Vernon. I also want to thank the board and the administration for bringing this up. I think back to my junior high school days, and probably a lab science course was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It really got me excited about science and pursuing a career in engineering. Of course, back then we used to light the tables on fire and do all kinds of cool stuff kids can't do today. But I guess I have a question and sort of a follow-up comment if I could. So the question is, you're asking for $500,000 this year and another $500,000 next year. Will money be spent during this first $500,000, or is the plan to get the pot of money $1 million and then figure out how to spend it best?
The plan is to get the pot of money because we looked at trying to do one classroom at a time to try and maybe space it out over periods. But the ability to do that, taking 6 classrooms down to 2, taking down walls and doing electrical work and all those things, it just did not make sense by cost. So we are trying to save over probably a 2-year time period and then do it all at the end of, once we get.
Good, I agree, that's the way to go. The other thing I would like to ask is if the board or the administration could consider putting together maybe a small panel of experts from industry who could come in and kind of give an evaluation of what the plan is to make sure that we're not building something that's I'm going to say it could be architect standard, but not workplace standard. And that's an important thing, I think, is find out what industry and employers, or maybe even colleges, are looking for.
Agreed.
And I'd like to see a committee impaneled for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just make one other comment about spending funds? Stephanie's right. We're not going to build anything, but to the extent you needed to pay for someone to come in and really cost out and get a proper bid that you could rely on may cost some money, right? Or to impanel this committee, which is a great idea, might cost some money as well. So, honing the vision down to something that's implementable and as reasonable and feasible and as modern as it can be is definitely in the sights for next year, should this pass.
Hi, Jay Goodell, 6 Westgate Road, Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. Just wanted to echo many of these similar comments. I went to Souhegan a long time ago, and I think many of the science labs have not changed since my time here. And then also so I definitely support this. And then I also just wanted to say, I would also support a much smaller percentage of those numbers, but just on the materials and the supplies and the other things in the classroom. So I've stayed involved with a number of my science teachers who mostly have now retired, and then others since. And I do come back to the school to work with them in some of the engineering classes. And just simple materials, 2x4s, screws, duct tape, those types of things. They're very small line items, and they're always in short supply. So, I guess all I'm saying is I would be very happy to support those resources as well.
Thank you, Mr. Goodell.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Purvis. I'm a member of the Amherst community, and I am also a Souhegan alum, a little more recent. I just had a few logistical questions. I also enjoyed my time at Souhegan taking chemistry classes and biology classes, but I noticed the plan is predominantly for the annex, and there is some need for improvements in the main building, and I was wondering where those fit into the future plan.
Yes, those are definitely in future plans. We're actually going to talk about our need assessment, that work that's been done, and the work in the main building will be part of a larger plan that will be discussed in the future. Yes, those are not outside of our radar. We've actually had our building and grounds director go through and do some repairs as seen. But yes, we do agree that there needs to be improvement in there as well.
Awesome. And then just as a follow-up question, because the walls will be taken down in these annex lab classrooms, do you anticipate that increasing the size of the classes? And if so, how will that impact quality, or will there be co-teaching? What does that look like in your minds?
So I don't know if I want to answer exactly for Mike, our principal, but I think right now we're just trying to get to some standards that are safe for students that are in the classes currently, knowing our student population, looking at the population that's in the elementary school that's going to be coming up as well, whether it's a little bit larger. We want to make sure that there is enough space for the classes even currently being offered.
Thank you. Did you have a comment, Christine?
Yes, Laura Taylor, School Board. It was also explained to us that this particular article can only be used, it's dedicated to science labs. When a lot of our budget, things can be moved around, that this completely supports science. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on this?
Dwayne Purvis, Amherst. I think, Stephanie, you probably maybe got on in front of this one, but I'll bring it up anyway. This building was built to accommodate between 750 and 800 students. Our current enrollment is at 700. The annex was built because at that time, 2000, 2002, 2004, we were bursting at the seams. And we had an enrollment up close to 1,100. So the annex was to accommodate 350 to 400 students. Now, if we are, it seems like, you know, one district, they need space. In this district, we have space. We're going to make a modification to that building that will last for some time until the next modification is made. When are we going or expected to get to an enrollment that will be consistent? I guess if we're taking rooms away and sprawling, then where are we in the next, it's really a crapshoot to try and guess out 10 years, but given what's in the pipe right now for the next 8 years, are we ever going to get to maximum enrollment? That's a question.
Say yes. So I'm trying to think of how to answer that. I mean, that's a real futuristic, and we know where enrollment is in the elementary school. So we know there are actually a few larger classes on and off. Can I answer when we'll get there? I cannot answer that.
Linda Kaiser, 6 Manchester Road. I just want to make a comment about enrollment. I did not know until a couple of days ago that Nancy Demers does something that other towns don't. She does a census. So she can tell you right now how many 1-year-olds there are, 2-year-olds. Do you guys know that?
Mm-hmm.
And do you work off those figures? It always sounds like you're guessing, and it seems to me like we actually have some fairly reliable facts.
Which we do. I mean, that's why we can roll up, you know, from kindergarten all the way through, assuming that you don't have a large building project come in, you don't have another change in enrollment. So it's that we don't know for sure,
Right.
but we do the best we can. And yes, we actually have a gentleman in town we've worked with who is statistically and worked with Nancy Demers, who has helped us.
I didn't know if you knew what she did.
Yes, we do.
It's
Thank you.
Not every town, I know that.
Yes. Yeah, we do
Okay.
work with her. So thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, Greg Fritz Amherst. Hey, you mentioned a lot of problems with the current science rooms, and just to be clear, is the proposed new rooms, do those fix all those problems, including the fire recommendation, things like that? Because it looked like the same space and the same population, so I understand that.
Well, yes, it would fix in the sense we're going from 6 classrooms down to 3 classrooms. So we're providing more space. You can then, once we break into the walls, then you can improve the electrical and you can improve moving the cabinets and getting away from the Bunsen burners being underneath the cabinets. All those things can be then fixed
Okay,
appropriately.
thanks. So the class size is the same, and the class population size maintains the same, and the class volume size increases, so you get a.
We get the
appropriate
safety,
ratio.
yes, we get the safety standards.
Okay, thanks. And I think the guys showing here of having an industry or university sort of input is a really good idea, just to make sure that it's aligned with the jobs someone's talking about in the future. So.
Yes, and I know our science teachers, along with our administration, have met and come together to work with groups on those standards. And that's partly why we're getting the cost, to make sure we do it correctly.
Great, thank you.
Are there other comments or questions? Seeing none and no one getting to come up to go to the microphones. Page here. So Article 3 will be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. At this point, can I have a motion? Oh, so I'm not going to do that because for the second time, Mr. Coughlin was looking at me. What I'd like to do is to withdraw that last statement and ask the chair of the Finance Advisory Committee to make their comments.
The Advisory Finance Committee voted 6-0 to 1 to approve, to support this proposal. The one was an abstention because he didn't feel like he had enough technical information. He was holding out for more concrete plans, which I think a lot of people in the room want to see as well. So it wasn't he wasn't opposed to it in principle, just on his own technical grounds. We definitely support the labs. I think it's important to emphasize that these were not, it's difficult to call them labs because they were not designed as labs. They are designed as flexible classrooms that have been used as labs. In their current state, they present a pretty serious safety issue. They can't do a lot of things that need to be done in labs because of it, because of fear of fires and chemical burns and things that get in the air. They're not functional. If our STEM program is to be taken seriously, we need to have real serious labs that can function in every way necessary for instruction. So I want to emphasize that the committee supports this one emphatically. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So now the moderator will try to get us back on track to where we should be. And Article 3 will be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. I'd like to ask for a motion at this point to restrict reconsideration of Article 3. Is there a motion?
So moved, Steve Coughlin.
Mr. Coughlin moved. Is there a second?
John Glover, the school board, seconds the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion's passed. Reconsideration is restricted. On to Article number 4. Shall the Souhegan Cooperative School District raise and appropriate the sum of up to $85,000 to be added to the Souhegan Recreation Revolving Fund, previously established in March 2016? This sum to come from the June 30, 2022 unassigned fund balance available for transfer on July 1, 2022. No amount is to be raised from new taxation. Majority vote is required. Recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School Board by a vote of 7-0. It's recommended by the Souhegan Cooperative School District Advisory Finance Committee by a vote of 6-0-1. The estimated impact of passing this article is $0 per thousand for Amherst and $0 per thousand for Mount Vernon. The estimated tax impact of not passing this article is -3 cents per thousand for Amherst and -4 cents per thousand for Mount Vernon. At this point, I'd like to recognize the chair to move Article number 4.
I make a motion to move Article 4 to the ballot.
Is there a second for Article 4?
John Glover, the Souhegan School Board, seconds the motion.
A second. And so I'll recognize the chair to address Article number 4.
Thank you. FY '22 was the first year we brought forward this warrant article to raise an even amount of money over the next 5 years to be ready to replace the turf field. We continue to raise money through rental fields and will reevaluate the amount of money needed to be raised based on estimated repair costs, or replacement cost is the correct term. Same as last year, we are asking to take $85,000 from the year-end unassigned fund balance to support the turf field replacement fund. This money is in a separate account and will not be used for any other purpose. Also, since we are asking for money from the unassigned fund balance, we are not asking for additional money to be raised from the taxpayer this year. The turf field does provide a benefit to our sports programs as they are able to hold their games even in inclement weather when the bean fields or front fields are not permitted to be used. It also does provide a benefit from rental of the fields when the private soccer and field hockey clubs look to where they can host their tournaments. We ask for support of this warrant article to continue raising an even amount of funds over the next 5 years.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to recognize the Advisory Finance Committee Chair, Dan View, for comments of the committee.
The Advisory Finance Committee voted 6-0 to 1 again to support this article. The one thing that we discussed was the promise that the rents for the field would support the refurbishment when it came time. There was a lot of discussion about that, and we understand that things have changed and that the costs have come down quite a bit from what they were originally estimated for. It was estimated originally that the field would cost about $1 million to replace. That estimate has come down to somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. It would cost more to replace the field and put grass back, considering the cost of demolition and replacing the grass and maintaining it. It does give us functionality later in the year when grass doesn't grow very well. I played football in high school, and I remember playing on a mud field in October and November, and it's you don't have good footing, you don't have a good playing surface. It increases the chances of injuries. So a turf field does benefit us greatly in that area. The one abstention was someone who had one person who was committed to the promise that was made to us that this would not cost anything out of the budget, but the rest of us understand that the reality has changed, and we need to assess what's in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the public on this warrant article?
Hello, Tiani Coleman, Amherst. I just have a question. So if this money was not put into the revolving fund, we would then at some point have to raise taxes, is that correct? And if that did not pass, what would happen to the turf field? What would we do?
Well, that would be a very good question. There's only a certain amount of disrepair that kids could safely play on the field. So in the end, if, over time it didn't pass, there could be a risk that we wouldn't be able to use the field at all if we couldn't raise tax money for it. So that's why we're trying to do it at a smaller amount each year. Unfortunately, there were promises made back before the field was put in that they thought there would be money coming in for rental fees, but unfortunately that's not happening for multiple reasons. So we decided we need to start ahead of time and just ask for a small amount each year.
Could I just add one thing? It's not that no money's coming in. There is revenue from the rental fees. It's just not enough as was envisioned at the time of inception. And some of the reasons for that is this was like one of the only turf fields around in the neighborhood. And now there's turf fields all over the place. So there's a lot more competition for fields, which means that your ability to leverage that as revenue is not as strong as it was envisioned, 10 years ago.
Martin Goulet, 22 Veterans Road, Amherst. As I mentioned earlier, 6 years ago, the Advisory Finance Committee asked who was going to be accountable for generating these rental fees and who would be measured against that yardstick as part of their job description. So I have two questions. Number one, exactly how much are we taking in rental fees, and who is accountable for meeting some quota or target of achievement on those rental fees? And by the way, I support the idea of raising the money in advance, being planful. I'm just sorely disappointed that we've wasted so much time after being asked and asked and asked and asked.
Right, so I would say, I believe it's our athletic director works closely with the Amherst Rec Department, who helps to manage the rental of the fields for us. And we have asked, if there's any marking that can be done, what extra, any extra groups you can come bring. But we've worked closely with the rec department, and unfortunately, I'm not sure any of us were here at the time when the field was voted on to put in. So we're doing what we can to not impact the taxpayer all in 1 year. But we do bring in, Amy, maybe you have a better idea, but is it around 30,000 a year, if that?
Yeah, the balance forward that you can see from FY21 was 78,000. So that's what was collected since the onset of the field being put in.
Thank you.
Yes, Laura?
Laura Taylor. I just wanted to say that my daughter plays 4 sports, and we really enjoyed having that turf field. And we have the facilities with the speakers and the stands, and lots of different sports can use the same facility. When previously, when it was grass, you kind of had to protect the grass, and you couldn't use the rest of the facility. So I just wanted to say this has been a great asset to our school and our student body.
Thank you. Are there other comments from the public? Seeing none, the moderator will direct that Article 4 be placed on the ballot as currently worded and thus declared. Can I have a motion to restrict reconsideration of Article 4? Steve Coughlin? Mr. Coughlin? Is there a second?
John Glover, the school board, seconds the motion.
Thank you. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Those
Aye.
opposed, like sign. The motion passes and reconsideration is restricted. At this point, I would like to introduce Chairman Grund for some additional remarks.
Yes, I'm going to introduce Christine Peters, who's going to discuss a portion of our capital needs assessment plan.
Good evening. You will notice that we are not presenting a capital needs maintenance request this year. Due to efficient work performed by our facility technicians and coordinated by Roger Preston, the Director of Buildings and Grounds, we were able to save money in work performed during fiscal year 22. As you can see by this slide, we have planned maintenance work for the next 5 years listed, but also have a plan that goes many more years out. This allows us to prioritize work and plan for needed costs to maintain our most expensive investments, our school buildings. Work that has been or will be performed during fiscal year 22 and 23 include new lockers in the boys and girls locker rooms, purchase of new special education vehicles, saving us money in transportation costs, HVAC controls and energy controls of New Hampshire software, allowing for a quick diagnosis of HVAC issues, field maintenance and sanding equipment, regular maintenance that includes painting and furniture replacement, adding the groundskeeper and facility maintenance technician to ensure we have the needed staff to maintain our buildings and keep them clean. As you can see on the next slide, there are needs that we are assessing the cost to repair or place for upcoming maintenance budgets. These include skylight repairs, gym curtain replacements, storage needs for sports and theater equipment, and carpet replacement. Finally, we have larger costs that are being coordinated with our other school districts. We realize that these costs are larger, and therefore planning to efficiently and effectively carry out these projects is essential. Stephanie spoke about the science labs this evening. However, we know there are upcoming costs for HVAC needs. We are working closely with our Director of Buildings and Grounds to ensure we are maintaining our systems and properly planning for future costs. The Souhegan advisory, you already presented, so we're not presenting.
No, we don't need
Never
that.
mind.
All right, Chairman Grund. Are you going to address the next item here for us? Thank you.
As we have discussed the expenses in the budget this evening, I would also like to present the revenues that are budgeted. Please remember that these are estimates and not guarantees. We are never guaranteed any of the money you see on this slide. These estimates are based on history and assessment of new regulations. Food service revenue is an estimate of food sales in our cafeteria. The other items are grants that our administration applies for to offset known costs and the state revenue provided through adequacy aid and property taxes. As noted by the decrease in state funding, there is an approximate $22,400 decrease in state funding to our school district this year. Finally, there is an estimate of an unassigned fund balance. This is the amount given back to the taxpayers each year. I would like to explain the changes between the FY22 and FY23 fund balance. The FY22 unassigned fund balance is much higher than in typical years. This is because it includes both the FY20 and FY21 unassigned fund balance. The reason for this is that during FY20, emergency order number 38 was issued due to COVID. This emergency order allowed the unassigned fund balance from FY20 to not need to be returned in FY21, therefore causing an increase in the FY21 tax rate as more funds were needed in the FY21 appropriations. However, any remaining funds were then returned in FY22 unassigned fund balance, which caused a decrease in the request for appropriations and the corresponding decrease in the FY22 tax rate. In FY23, we returned to what is standard practice, where the unassigned fund balance is returned each year. So now we have what would be a more typical return to the taxpayer. The executive order caused a bit of an exaggeration in tax rates both up and down in prior years. As you can see on the next slide, this is one of the reasons the tax rate is higher for FY23 than FY22. The trend line gives you a good projection of the tax rate over the past 10 years. On the next slide, you can see the breakdown of the tax rate by fund for each town. The operating budget shows a 54-cent per thousand rate for Amherst and a $1.36 per thousand rate for Mount Vernon. The science lab renovation warrant article is 18-cent per thousand rate for Amherst and a 25-cent per thousand rate for Mount Vernon. Because the turf field replacement warrant article is raising money or is asking money to come from the year-end unassigned fund balance, there is no additional rate for Amherst or Mount Vernon. And finally, without asking for funding for the capital maintenance fund, there's a reduction of 6 cents per thousand to Amherst and 8 cents per thousand to Mount Vernon. This leaves the totals of 65 cents per thousand for Amherst and $1.53 per thousand for Mount Vernon. Can I give a wrap up?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to say thank you for listening to our presentation this evening. I'd like to thank Mike Berry and all of the staff at Sohegan High School for providing flexibility and perseverance through a trying 2 years in education. We appreciate the extra efforts and creativity from administration, guidance, faculty, special education, facility technicians, and food service. Thank you to the SAU staff for supporting the schools and the school board through the budget process, especially Amy Facey, who put in many, many, many extra hours answering all of our questions. Finally, thank you to the Souhegan Advisory Finance Committee for their dedication and detailed analysis of the budget. As a final wrap-up, I want to remind you that we are asking for $20,314,508, or a 2.7% increase in our operating budget. a $500,000 for science lab renovation warrant article to support our curriculum and safety in the classroom, and $85,000 from the year-end unassigned fund balance to support the turf field replacement fund. Thank you for attending this evening in person or listening via Zoom, and voting will take place on Tuesday, March 8th from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. here at Sohegan High School. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our deliberation on the warrant articles and presentation of information. Is there any other business to come before the meeting tonight? Seeing none, let me also offer my thanks to everyone who came out tonight to participate. It's an important part of what we do as communities in order to ensure that we foster the level of education that our communities demand. So thank you for your attendance, and I will hereby declare the meeting closed.